Good morning, dear learners. Today we are going to see feminist writing, and I am Kalayarasi, Assistant Professor, Department of English from St.Josephs College of Arts and Science for Women, Huzur. Okay, in feminist writing, today we are going to learn a prose. The name of the prose is The Day They Burned the Books. It is written by Jean Rice. Let me see about the author. She is a British novelist. She was born and grew up in the Caribbean island of Dominica. From her age of 16, she mainly resided in England, where she was sent for her education. After the death of her father in 1910 and some distraught events, she began writing and produced an early version of her novel Voyage in the Dark. During the First World War, she served as a volunteer worker in a soldier's canteen. Let me see her major works written by Jean Rice. White Sargasso Sea. It was published in 1966. The second one is Good Morning, Midnight in 1939. Third one is Voyage in the Dark in 1934. Quartet in 1928. And then after leaving Mr. Watkinson in 1930. Good Afternoon, Mrs. Cavinovan, 1973. The Day They Burned the Books was published in 1968 in the collection Tigers Are Better Looking. So the work is published in the collection called Tigers Are Better Looking. It expresses the cultural tension between the Western and Caribbean values, identity, and otherness. The events took place in the exotic West Indian, which is the region under the colonial rule of many European countries, including England. So, as it is a prose, let we see the major characters that revolves around this work. The main characters are the narrator and then Eddie. He is narrator's friend. Mr. Sawyer, Eddie's father. He is an agent for small steamship. Then Mrs. Sawyer, wife of Mr. Sawyer, and she is Eddie's mother. She is decent and respectable, and she is an educated woman also. Mildred, servant of Eddie's family. He is a servant who works in the family of Eddie. Let me see the plot overview of the prose. The story revolves around the day when the community decide to burn a pile of books. So the very opening of the play itself, they were ready to burn a pile of books. Francis reflects on the past events leading up to this day, focusing on the impact of Elaine's actions. Let me see the inciting incident that happens. Elaine, a friend of the couple, borrows book from Francis and his wife. Elaine fails to return the borrowed book, causing tension and suspicion in the relationship. Okay, let me see the story. In Jean Rice's story, a little British boy Eddie is in a unique position in his Caribbean residence. His father, Mr. Sawyer, is an educated British man who loathed the Caribbean islands. His mother, Mrs. Sawyer, however, is an educated colored woman who grew up in the Caribbean and embodied her cultural ideas. In the story, we can see the narrator and her friend Eddie both feel left out, but decide to stick together and better themselves on a personal level rather than hatred. Going further, one look at the life of stories author Jean Riss shows that she felt similar intercultural cultural pressures and ended up adopting a similar strategy in life. Even so, simply from examining the creation of the characters' unique situations, it is quite clear that Rice was drawing off her own cultural experience to contribute to the story because she also was from the mixed race parents in the Dominican. And throughout the story, we could witness the clashing cultures. Rice must have been first hand the tensions between the Western culture and Caribbean culture. These tensions between concepts are exemplified through her writing. For instance, while Mrs. Sawyer has a general distaste towards books, Mr. Sawyer gravitates towards and hoards them. Ultimately, the tension here is caused by misunderstanding of what books stand for. To Mrs. Sawyer, books are a symbol or reminder of their Western oppressors. To Mr. Sawyer, books are a symbol of homeland and the Western world. This distinction carries significant height throughout the short story. Okay, in the story, Sawyer will say, I don't like strawberries. Eddie said on one occasion, he said what has his father said. You don't like strawberries? Moreover, Eddie states, I don't like daffodils. When Eddie states that he doesn't like daffodils, he is referring to his dislike of aspects of English culture that the children have been encouraged to admire. He has probably never actually seen daffodils, yet they represent to him England and English culture. More than that, they represent his father and his father's love of English culture and consequent disdain of local culture. There is an assumption in the work that is all things British or English are to be admired and to be respected. In spite his cultural adaptation to the Caribbean, following his father's death, Eddie began to gravitate towards books and identify himself with his father. Thus, while Eddie viewed books as a symbol or remind his father, that the books remind him about his father only. Mr. Sawyer's library also became an emblem of British nationality and Western culture within their Caribbean house. In their house itself, Mr. Sawyer seems to be having a lot of books, that is they comparing it to a library. Was an object of identification that was incompatible with his mother's culture. It is totally different from her. Even though she is educated, Mr. Sawyer see her like an uneducated only. Perhaps she felt this way because she felt as if the books like Britain would infiltrate into the household, into the family's consciousness, into their Caribbean ways of life, threatens the community of the colonials, and ultimately taint Eddie's identification with her cultural heritage in favor of their oppressors. Finally, in the end of the story, Mr. Sawyer death, the narrator also went to the funeral. After the death of Mr. Sawyer, Eddie took the possession of the books. Eddie's mother planned to burn the piles of book. Eddie and the narrator tried to prevent the bills from being burnt, but they could save only one, that is also a French work, which becomes useless for them.